Welcome. I have a guest host this week, Chase Mattioli. I'll introduce Chase in just a minute. I am bummed not to have Tana, but so excited to have you. Just read a couple of reviews from Plata Poem. That's an interesting name. These two people are the most dynamic duo that I've ever listened to. I love that. So inspiring, and everything they say resonates and makes so much sense. It is just straight facts backed by science, and it is just so unbelievably soothing and comforting to listen to when you're hurting. I'm so inspired, and it has changed my life. My husband and my two daughters are noticing and wanting to learn from me now how to have brain envy. So cool. And then one more from Lotus London from the United Kingdom, which I'm off to tomorrow. I love the clarity of the podcast, highlighting concordance, association between sleep disorders such as sleep apnea and psychiatric disorders. It's something I'm mindful of in clinical practice. I look forward to reading The Brain Warrior's Way. So thank you for listening. Thank you for writing in. Tana always says that's her payment for doing this podcast is hearing from you. This month at Amen Clinics, our theme is it's insane not to look at the brain. And I think that really applies with your story. So Chase actually works with us here in data analysis, and he is the stepson of our CEO, Terry Weber. Mm-hmm. And when Terry brought your stepsister here, she got so much better that when you were struggling, she was thinking you would really benefit from this.
Definitely.
So let's start. We're going to divide this week into 4 podcasts. We're going to talk about Chase's story, a wrong mental illness diagnosis, and we're going to talk about what he learned from imaging. We're going to talk about where he is today and what are the steps. So it's really about transformation. And then we're going to talk about, well, how do you know if it's something like bipolar disorder, head trauma, or depression? And really the big problems with psychiatric diagnoses. So tell everybody who you are and how this all came about.
Well, like you alluded to, I came to Amen vis-a-vis my stepmother, Terry Weber. She had noticed that my mental health was somewhat deteriorating and my depression was going through the roof about a little over a year ago. And my whole life I've had a history of, let's say, making less than smart decisions. I was always kind of like a daredevil, whether it was snowboarding or doing extreme sports. I always liked to be out there and kind of taking more risks than I should. That led me to the sport of racing. My family has a history in the sport of racing. We own a NASCAR track in northeastern PA. And because of having that family relationship, I've been driving cars since I was 5 years old. And
so your family owns the Pocono Speedway.
Yep.
Which is incredibly famous and
it's
been
really
part
cool.
of the NASCAR circuit for a long time.
Yep, we were one of the original tracks. We were one of the first ones in the Northeast, and my grandfather was able to found that in the 1960s. So it was really cool, and it's really awesome that's still in our family. And because of that, it's like less of a company or business for us and more of just like what we do. It's our family. And because of that, I became a race car driver. And being a race car driver means you crash a lot from time to time. I mean, being a bad race car driver, I don't know if I was the best.
Well, even a good race car driver, you cannot control the brains of those people around you on the track. right? I mean, just the thousands or tens of thousands of scans I've seen whenever I'm on the freeway and I'm just thinking about all the brains around me. It's a wonder that I can make it from Orange County to LA
Right.
alive. And so if you take all race car drivers, and what I've seen, there's a lot of toxicity because of the gasoline fumes that you've been around since you were a little
Oh,
boy.
yeah.
There's a lot of toxicity. And how many race car drivers have never been in an accident?
Yeah.
Probably not very many.
Probably less than 1%. Yeah.
Right.
It's like saying a football player hasn't been tackled. You know?
So you just see so you're on a track with all of these vulnerable brains.
Oh, tons. Yeah. Well, and within the sport, it's not even just the gasoline. There's so many aerosols for cleaning products. I mean, we use
hadn't
lubricants
thought about that.
on everything. Even in the car, the oil heaters right behind the driver, and they have to preheat the oil before every race. So you're literally sitting on a cooking vat of oil for about an hour before every race and just ingesting all of that.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad things about the air quality in NASCAR, but they are making a lot of improvements since I've been in the sport, and it's definitely getting better. But unfortunately, the issues it caused for me weren't the ones that you would think right away. You know, you think of a car accident, you break your leg, you break your back, break your neck. For me, just got a bunch of concussions, which in racing aren't real injuries. You know, it's one of those things that you can still race the next week most times. They don't really test you, so... And also within racing, we don't have backups. So it's not like I can get hurt the previous week and miss the next week. You have to show up if you're going to get your points. So a lot of the times, whether it was an injury from a wreck or a concussion, you just kept going. So it wasn't exactly the best health choices at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, I was definitely making a lot of non-brain healthy decisions at the moment.
So you're around toxic fumes. You've had multiple concussions. You've even had, because I know your history, you've had concussions outside of racing. And then, so what were your symptoms? What were you experiencing before you went to see your first psychiatrist?
So I've had depression my whole life, I would say. Like probably my first fit of depression, I was maybe 10 years old. Went and saw a psychologist. From there, you know, it was just general depression, anxiety.
So talk more about when you say depression when you were 10. What did that look like?
For me, it was if I had a test the next day, I would get crazy anxiety. So I'd start sweating, couldn't sleep, just talking to my mom, I can't do this, tons of negative self-talk. I mean, it was something that I had my whole life. Like if I had a big presentation tomorrow or anything going on, it would just almost build up inside of me. And it's got that emotional, it's kind of hard to put a label on it, but it's like your chest gets tight because you can feel it really hard. And so I've always kind of had that, which then led to sadness. I can't do this, like it's too much for me. And most of my decisions in life are kind of fed with that kind of thought process.
So you had a high ant population.
High, super high.
So ants, for those of you that listen, we always talk about them, automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come into your mind automatically and ruin your day. And in school, no one ever taught you how to eradicate or how to manage the ants.
Well, and it was kind of crazy for me because I had all this anxiety for performance and like doing well in school, and I always did great in school. So when I would talk to my teachers and they'd see me freaking out or like having an issue, they're like, why? They couldn't understand why I was anxious or why I was upset because I always did a good job. And that was like the hardest thing. Nobody could help me. Nobody knew why I was getting so riled up. They had no way of teaching me like, hey, it's not a big deal.
And nobody even thought about the concussion you had. Your first one was how old?
I was 7 years old, I think, or 8 years old, my first concussion.
And what happened?
That one, I fell out of a tree. Yeah, a lot of bad decisions. Falling out of trees, snowboarding, basketball. If I could hit my head, I've pretty much done it doing everything. But yeah, nobody thought about that. And then when I got to be 13, it became a little bit more emotional. So when I'd get that anxiety, I would kind of get mad or just like kind of angry for no reason. And you can see I was tense. Like you can almost see it on my face. It'd be building up kind of like that pressure I was telling you about before. And when I'd get mad, like not like kind of like, oh, I'm grumpy at you, like, oh, these are all the worst things I can think of, and I'm gonna make sure you know all of them real quick. So it wasn't very healthy, not a way I wanted to manage my life.
So how would people know you were mad? You would yell, you would scream, you would...
Yell, scream. I mean, it's kind of like those things like you think about a conversation and you know those one things you shouldn't say, or like there's some things that are off limits. I would say those things. Like it was to the point where there was no like I'm gonna regret saying this later thing. I would be super mad.
So you'd have no supervisor, no filter.
None at all. Yeah, if it was in my mind, it was coming out, and it was coming out as aggressive as possible.
Which is usually not helpful.
No, wasn't the best way to make friends.
I always say, Jerry Seinfeld said the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. And when you hurt the front part of your brain, the break in your brain, those things get out. And the problem with the brain is it has memory. So people then remember and become afraid of you.
Oh, definitely. And I could see the people that I had those interactions with, they always kind of look at me differently. It's like, oh, I really don't want to make him mad. No, it's not something I'd take pride in or anything.
Yeah.
But
okay. And so then what happened?
so at that point, it's like, all right, maybe there's something more going on. So I went and saw a therapist, and he made me take, it was some kind of test on his computer, and I can't remember what it was. But essentially afterwards, he's like, oh, you're bipolar. And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, no, you're bipolar. And
So from a questionnaire, you get diagnosed with bipolar, and then what happens?
so then he started prescribing me different drugs. I was on maybe 8 different, maybe 10 bipolar medications in my life. And they normally go in about a year to a 6-month stretch of like, hey, let's try this. Let's see if this helps your program. None of them ever really helped. And if they helped, it would be like, all right, I'm a little less upset and angry, but I've also got like my skin's bright red and like I can't taste stuff, or I put on a ton of weight, or I had no bad emotions. I was never angry, but I was never happy. I was never anything.
So you're flat.
Exactly. I call it being cardboard. Just nothing, just taste. So anyway, went through that for years, and had acne, had bad skin. I mean, so none of that stuff's gonna help you with the depression and everything else. Nobody once ever said, hey, take a look at your diet or anything else like that. Just here's a new pill, here's a new something else. And oh, that one didn't work. Well, we'll try this one. And it never really got me.
So you're on multiple medications that flatten you, that help, but don't help you feel joy. And no one's talking to you about your life and your lifestyle.
Yep, not once.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about Chase's visit to our New York clinic. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here with Chase Mattioli, and we're talking about it's insane not to look at your brain. Let me read another review. I love these. This is MCRDWN from the United States. Just found this podcast and listened to 10 episodes. Help for stress, anxiety, gut health, diet, plus loads of skill for managing life. Love your easy manner and honest sharing of personal stories. Thanks so much. You have a new fan, which we are grateful for. So Chase and I are talking about Chase's story. And grew up around the Pocono Speedway, race cars, did a lot of sort of thrill-seeking behavior. But young started to suffer with anxiety, depression, irritability, get diagnosed with bipolar disorder on multiple medications. I think one of your other diagnoses was intermittent explosive disorder, which means your temper's really bad.
Yep.
And then you actually saw one of our friends, a chiropractor, in Chicago, and Dr. Antonucci, and he recommended you get scanned.
He did, yeah. So I had gotten to a point, I was working in Chicago, and I was working a job for a larger company doing data analytics like I do for you now. And it was very much like a financial type industry where we start at 7 a.m. and we don't leave until 10 to 11 p.m. every night. So working those types of hours, and I was eating crap, led me to get super stressed out to the point where I had a breakdown. I woke up one morning, I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't really do anything, and just couldn't just process anything. So
And this is despite being on your medications.
all my medication, yep, all my medication, and I was working out, which I thought was good, taking tons of whey protein because I was trying to put on muscle and all this other stuff. Bad idea. We'll get to that. So anyway, everything I thought I was doing to help my health was actually super bad and hurting me. And I had this breakdown, and luckily Dr. Antonucci was able to basically identify and say, hey, you should definitely go to one of the clinics. And at the time, when I was living in Chicago, you didn't have the Chicago clinic open. So the next closest clinic to me was New York. So I ended up going to see Dr. Rishi Sood, and he was amazing. I really loved my experience there.
Yeah, Dr. Sood's a triple board certified psychiatrist. He's board certified in general psychiatry, pediatrics, child psychiatry. When he first came to work with us, he was about 80 pounds overweight.
Okay.
Because, he'd spent so much time training, but no time taking care of himself.
Okay.
And after you work with us for a while, you realize your lifestyle really does matter. The food you eat really does matter. And he's like, well, I can't tell people to get healthy if I'm not healthy.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was super fun for me to get the emails on a regular basis. Hey, I'm down 20 pounds. I'm down 40 pounds. I'm down 80 pounds, and I'm exercising. And
Yeah.
it was really awesome. Yeah, he's one of our great young doctors.
Well, and what you just said, young, that was the cool thing for me is most of my doctors that I worked with my whole life were probably 40 years older than me. And not that that was bad, but Dr. Sood was closer to my age, and we were just able to communicate on, I think, a different level because I was 80 pounds overweight, and he was like, oh, I get it.
He got it.
So we were still pretty good friends. I talked to Dr. Sood maybe once every few weeks or so. He's just a great dude. Really enjoyed my experience with him. And, I got my scan, which was huge for me. So we went to New York in the process of 2 days. We did the full eval, concentration, and at rest. And what Dr. Sood was able to see was all of my concussions. It was basically a map of a lifetime of bad decisions. But what was cool is that he can say, oh, yeah, I can see all the head injuries. I can see where you probably had some toxicity from fumes and whatnot. But the best thing he said after that is like, we can fix this. Like, it's not like you're broken, you're just kind of out of tune, right? From a car guy, I understood that. Like, a car's never broken, it just needs to be tuned up and fixed. And I guess that's what you say all the time. How do you know if you don't look, right? Well, in a car, how do you know if you don't open the hood? It's just the most obvious thing.
And that's one of the analogies I've used almost from the time we started a scan is if your car smokes, uses too much gas, stalls in the middle of an intersection, and you took it to a mechanic and you just told the mechanic the symptoms, and he decided to do something major on the car without popping the hood, would you trust the mechanic?
No.
Absolutely not. You're like, aren't you going to look? How do you know unless you look? Yeah, you're suffering. Anxiety, depression, with the irritability, and no one's looking. They're assuming, based on a checklist, you meet 6 out of these 9 criteria, you have bipolar disorder, which is really a lifelong disorder, which you should be medicated for the rest of your life because there's a very high incidence of relapse and even suicide. And no one's telling you how to optimize your brain because no one has looked at it. So toxicity never comes up. Head trauma may come up once. When we saw your scan, one of the first things I learned doing scans is mild traumatic brain injuries ruin people's lives, and nobody knows about it. And even though most psychiatrists go, well, you've ever had a head injury? You'll go, no. And then we go, well, are you sure? Have you ever fallen out of a tree, fell off a fence, dove into a shallow pool, been in a car accident, played sports where you got a concussion? And then people go, I remember when I did it with your stepmother, she's like, no. And then after I went, are you sure? She then told me about 8 concussions.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, you were talking about Dr. Sood, and when you work here, it's kind of hard not to get that healthy culture. And then you learn so much because you're listening to the podcast, you're reading your books, took the brain health coaching certification course. And now I'm like doing histories on myself with my mom all the time. What happened when I was 6? Like, did I do this? Did I fall out? Like, what was I eating? What did you eat when you were pregnant? Because I need to know. Yeah, they hate me, but it's so much fun. And now that I'm conscious about it, it's kind of, I think you say this a lot too. If you get one person, you probably get 10 because you're going to get their family and you're going to get everybody else. And one thing you do say is be around the most healthy person you can stand. Luckily, my family can still stand me. I think they're kind of on the cusp on it right now, but it's been really cool because now I get an education from you and I'm able to share it with them. And if 20% of it sticks, I'm kind of stoked on it. It's harder to change everybody, but it's helping.
Well, it happens over time. The longer you live the message, the more influence you end up having. Like, one of my favorite stories is my dad, who was difficult for me. And his favorite word when I was growing up was bullshit. His second favorite word was no. And he was just hard for me. And when I told him I was going to be a psychiatrist, he asked me why I didn't want to be a real doctor, why I wanted to be a nut doctor and hang out with nuts all day long. And then when I got really healthy after looking at my own brain, he's like, oh, great, now you're a health nut. What's with you and the nuts? And I can't live without my bread and my dessert. And then when he got sick, I'm the first person he said, I'm sick of being sick. What do I do? And then he completely transformed his life. I mean, it's like one of the best stories of my life. So if you live the message, and that's the whole brain warrior's way, because you're in a war for the health of your brain. You know that now, right? People are easy to give you psychiatric drugs. It's easy to give you bad food. It's easy to encourage you to do behaviors that put you at risk for trauma and damage. If you're not armed, prepared, and aware, you lose. And then it affects your relationships. It affects your ability to work because you're really bright. But if your brain's not right, you never live your potential. And then you're unhappy, right? Because self-esteem really comes from the difference between where you think you should be and where you are. Yep. And if you're not close to where you think you should be, you get into self-loathing. And so... But you go to New York, you see Dr. Sood, he sees the trauma in your brain. And did he put you on more medication?
No, he took me off of all medication. That was the number one thing. He was like, you're not bipolar. And he was the one that backed up the intermittent explosive disorder. So what he was able to see in my scan were holes or depressions in my prefrontal cortex and then also my temporal lobes. Temporal lobes obviously being emotional type control, and then your prefrontal.
So the people listening don't know that. So your temporal lobes are underneath your temples. They're behind your eyes. They're large structures in the brain. But they have this very important part of your brain. Some of you have heard about it. It's called the amygdala. It's Greek for almond because it's an almond-shaped structure. And it's involved with anxiety and emotional reactiveness. And it sits right behind a very sharp, bony ridge and is easily damaged from concussions. I always say if God used me as a consultant, I'd have said, please put a bumper guard there because it just is so easily hurt. And when you hurt it, then a small thing will happen and you'll have a big negative reaction. There's actually, it's called Kluver-Bucy Syndrome.
Okay.
When you damage both of them, when they do this in monkeys, they have this thing called sham rage. It's like for no reason, they, get very aggressive.
Yeah.
And when you look back and you're like, why did you do that? How was that helpful? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, did that really get you what you want? And almost everybody who's been diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder has trouble in their temporal lobes. And so sometimes anticonvulsants help, sometimes brain rehabilitation helps, like we talked about hyperbaric oxygen.
Yeah.
So when you stay with us, we're going to actually talk about the steps that Chase used to rehabilitate his brain and get healthy. Stay with us. We're back. We're talking about Chase's journey, and in our week on It's Insane Not to Look at Your Brain. Some more reviews on the podcast. I love this one. Retam from the United States. Easy to follow. Love the information. Helpful and insightful. Thank you for your guidance and sharing your information. Well, we love doing that. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to do this with me, because there's so many people who are suffering, and they do exactly what you did. Things aren't right, and you go to professionals to get help, but the help's incomplete at best. Because they didn't look at your brain. They don't know that you're really struggling with the chronic effects of multiple concussions, mild traumatic brain injuries. Although we say mild, not always irritates me, because I'm like, there's nothing mild when you actually look at the scan.
Yeah.
That it affected your frontal lobes, forethought, judgment, impulse control, organization, planning, empathy, learning from the mistakes you make. I mean, that's sort of important.
Yeah.
Affects your temporal lobes, learning, memory, mood stability, temper control. And even though you're really bright, you're not getting to your potential, because the organ that gets you to your potential, which is your brain, is not optimized. Right? I mean, you're working out and you want to optimize. I saw an NBA player last week, and he texted me later. He said, I've spent thousands of hours thinking about and working out my biceps, and I've not thought about my brain at all. How crazy is that?
It's crazy. Well, it's funny for me, coming from the world of racing, like, we don't work out our biceps. We do like conditioning for endurance training, but the best organ we ever use is our brain and our eyes. Like, that's the number one thing we use, and nobody ever thought about optimizing the brain. And we optimize everything in the car. Like, we have engineers that are crazy, and nobody thought, like, biggest computer in the car, and we're not even touching it. Like, what are we doing? So it was really cool when I came here. It made me look at the brain less as like that other thing in my body that nobody knows about, and more so as something that I can actually impact and change and have an effect on the health of it. I don't think I ever thought of it as anything other than it's in there, it's cool, and that's how I think. Like, you don't think it's something I can play with almost.
Right. And when we did your follow-up scan, it was better. How exciting is that? And we realized it can still be better, still. And, when you do the follow-up scan, you want to go, okay, how am I doing? And what else can I do to make it better? So what were the things that you and Dr. Sood started with? And what has it evolved into? How have you changed your life?
Well, the first thing was taking me off the medication. So I got off of all prescription medication and switched over to supplements. So I take Brain MD supplements, serotonin mood support. I also take a little bit of Focus Energy, and I take some Brain and Body Power Max.
So in those, just so people know, so serotonin mood support helps your mood. Focus and energy actually helps activate your frontal lobes so that you have better sustained energy and focus. And then brain and body power max, multiple vitamin, but the best one on the planet that we could design. High doses of omega-3 fatty acids and brain and memory power boost, which has 7 different things to optimize your brain in multiple ways, in multiple mechanisms. And so you're on a sophisticated supplement regimen.
So that was the first thing that I started to do. And I think for a lot of people, supplements, the first thing is like, what pills? I got to take all these. After you take a little bit of them, you feel the results right away. I'd rather take 6 pills of good supplements than 1 prescription pill that never makes me feel better. So getting into that rhythm and routine was awesome. And then the next step was he looked at my gut and essentially said, it looks like you're having digestive issues. And as you know, the gut and brain connection is super important. So
I've heard that. I heard it's like really important.
yeah, right? It gets around. So I went and got a test and found out, or was diagnosed with having leaky gut syndrome. So I wasn't absorbing any of the nutrients that are going into my stomach, or they're going right into my bloodstream, et cetera, and so forth. And that wasn't really good for my brain health or actually absorbing the supplements or anything else I was trying to do.
That's a huge part of getting well.
Yeah. So,
Huge. Because when you have leaky gut, so your intestinal tract has a single cell lining, that this one cell lining of your gut, from your mouth to the other end, when it starts to leak, when that single cell lining, actually the junctions start to widen, that means you're getting toxins from the outside through your intestines into your body, which then make you sick, makes it hard to lose weight, you have more pain, you have brain fog. I think a lot of those things you had.
oh, yeah. Well, and I had a horrible diet too. So first we fixed the stomach, and then it was change the diet. And the best way to start re-examining your diet's an elimination diet. At least that's what I've come to find. So elimination diet is basically eliminating one food from your diet per week, see how it reacts within you. I did that for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I went and got a food sensitivity test done, the blood work. It's kind of like skipping ahead of the line. You can see what you're reactive to from a sensitivity standpoint. And sensitivity meaning almost like a mild allergy that causes inflammation, right? Cause redness, unwanted weight gain, et cetera, and so forth, and probably a slew of problems I don't even know. So fix my diet. Had to cut out a lot of things that I love, which was hard at first. Did the food sensitivity test and found out that I'm sensitive to tomatoes, almost all gluten, pork. So I'm Italian, so that was like my whole diet right there. Also grapes, so wine, yeast. So when I learned this, I decided just to stop drinking totally, because alcohol is horrible for me. It wasn't helping my gut at all, and the fact that everything in it was bad for me just was a
So
good
why
wake-up call.
do nurses, Tana's a nurse, why do nurses put alcohol on your skin before they give you a shot?
Sterilize?
Yeah, decreases the bacteria in your skin. And how many bacteria are in your gut?
Right.
100
Colonies.
trillion, right? And so people don't think really alcohol is harmful, but it's disrupting the gut bacteria. We call it the gut microbiome. And those bacteria, your friends, they help to make neurotransmitters, they help with digestion, they keep the intestinal lining healthy, and they make neurotransmitters.
They're huge.
They're huge. And so, and it's hard because you said you love them,
Oh, yeah.
but I don't know if you've ever been in a bad relationship. So I've been in bad relationships with women. Thank God I'm not now. But I'm never going to be in a bad relationship with food. I'm never going to love something that doesn't love me back. And so you're in a relationship that's really sort of abusive with food, right? You're in love with things that hurt you.
Yeah, well, it likes me. It treats me nice when it wants to, you know. It loves me. You don't know us. Yeah, that's exactly what food is. So I changed that relationship, and now it's more food is fuel. It feeds my brain, it feeds my stomach, and it makes me a better person. So I mentioned in an earlier podcast, my family can barely stand me, but they're working on it, right? So every time they go to eat their pasta, I'm like, do you know what's in this? And do you know the gluten? And you know that? And they're like, don't care. But
Right, because they haven't suffered
yep.
like you.
But we're getting somewhere. So let me continue on what I did beyond the diet. So you said, there's more stuff we can be doing, and one of them was HBOT, right? Which
So
is
hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
and luckily, working here, we have access to one that's fairly available. So I go every morning before work. And what it does is puts about 30 pounds of pressure on your body. And when it squeezes you, it's almost like squeezing a fruit and making the blood flow faster, right? So I do that every morning. And it's weird because people go, what does it do? And I'm like, I don't really know.
Increases blood flow to your brain.
Well, they ask me what the feeling is, and I'm like, I don't really feel it. And then if I stop doing it for a week or 2 weeks, then I just feel awful. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So I notice when I don't do it, it's like one of those things that I guess is so subtly helpful that like, oh, I feel better today, but you don't really like. It's not like taking like a shot of espresso and you're awake. But it's been definitely helpful for me. I really enjoy doing that. And then going back to the dieting thing, what's cool for my family, like we started with the racetrack, right? So not only do I have these issues with my gut, stomach, and health, but most of my family members have a form of gastroparesis or some other form of, gut issues. So we decided to kind of branch out of the racing business, and we're starting our own organic farm, which we broke ground on about a month ago.
Wow, congratulations. That's very exciting.
Well, we're really excited because not a lot of people associate racing or NASCAR with organic food, but I mean, it's where farmers go to watch their sports for the most part. So we'll be the first track to offer organic fruits and vegetables at the facility when the fans come in. And
Love that.
well, and we'll be able to eat now too, which is
So you'll be
cool.
able to eat when you go there.
Yeah, it was hard for me.
Now, you also lost a little bit of weight too, right?
Lost about 80 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I've seen the before and after pictures. It's stunning.
Yeah.
And what does that do to your self-esteem?
Doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt. For me, I was about 80 pounds overweight. I had a giant red afro, and I had tons of inflammation, so my skin was like a deeper shade of pink or red. So, it's very attractive. Worked out great for me. But no, it was really easy. Once I did the diet, the weight just started falling off. I lost 10, 20 pounds in about a month. And then after that, it just became like almost like a rolling effect where I was like, all right, I lost 10, I'm going to lose another 5. And you get so excited about it. I'm sure anybody that does any kind of working out or physical activity, it's like, all right, I want to lose 20 pounds. Once you lose 20 pounds, I kind of want to lose 5 more pounds. And then you're like, oh, how do I put weight back on? Now I want muscle. So it's been fun for me. Definitely.
And you've also been cycling and
Oh, yeah.
weight training and doing the diet. And I guess I have to ask this question. Was getting healthy hard?
Getting healthy, there's actually a really cool quote, and I reference it a lot, and it's not the best source, but it is what it is. I was watching late night television, and there's Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill, right? They're two famous actors, and Jonah Hill recently lost a ton of weight, and he's on the talk show. And they're asking him, how'd you do it? Like, what was it? And he goes, I just talked to Channing Tatum. He's in great shape. He probably knows how to do this. And Channing said, it's easy, or it's simple. It's not easy, right? So getting healthy is super simple. I mean, you read one of your books, the steps are all in there. It's not like there's some kind of secret code. It's just not easy. You're going to have to say no to food. You're going to have to say no to going out with friends that want to do certain things that you know are bad for you. Like, you got to take responsibility for yourself, which isn't ezy.
Because
But-
it's a war,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what we talk about. Everywhere you go, someone's trying to shove bad food down your throat that will kill you early. But consistent decisions over time transform your mind, your brain, and your body. I know one of my friends, I asked him if it was hard, and he said, being sick is hard. This is easy.
It's 100% true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, since I've gotten healthy, I can't go back.
And, so many people do that, right? They get on Jenny Craig or Nutrisystems. They lose a bunch of weight. One of my PBS in Houston, one of my hosts who I adore, I came to the station, and I'd been there a bunch of times. And I'm like, Arnie, you've lost so much weight. How'd you do that? He said, I went on the HCG diet, human pregnancy hormone diet, and 500 calories a day. And I'm like, congratulations. He said, well, as a way to celebrate, today's my last day on the diet, I ordered 2 deep dish pizzas from this place in Chicago as a way to celebrate. And I just looked at him like he was the dumbest person on the planet. And he's like, what? I'm like, let me get this right. You just went to rehab. And as your way to celebrate, you're going to get drunk. It's like, that's insane.
That's ridiculous.
So it's a lifestyle that you need to figure out, how can I maintain this over time? I eat great food consistently, but food I love that loves me back, because it's a relationship. Right.
And it's funny, not funny, but this past few weeks, we've installed the Bright Minds program here at Amen Clinics. So one of the best things to get healthy is to surround yourself with healthy people, right? Like we keep talking about. And now I'm in an environment where everybody's focused on it. It's easier for me because everybody that I'm surrounded with isn't trying to say, have that slice of pizza, or let's go get that drink, or, let's skip and do this. Everybody's like, oh no, like we're conscious about it. We want to do it. And that would be my biggest piece of advice, is start paying attention to the things that impact your health, and start paying attention to the people that you surround yourself with, because they'll make it easier for you.
People are contagious.
They are.
Fastest way to get healthy. Find the healthiest person you can stand and spend as much time around him or her as possible. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm here with Chase Mattioli. We're talking about it's insane not to look at your brain. And when you do, at least for me, everything in my life changed. And you can say the same thing when you looked at your brain. Everything has changed and you've fallen in love with your brain. And I'm so happy. Let me read one more review. Taisha Ann, thank you so much for creating this podcast. My 16-year-old suffers from ADHD and sleep disorders. I look forward to bringing him to you for a scan to see how we can help him be the best person he can be. I want to do all that we can to heal his brain. And it's, you can tell, it's not just you have 6 out of these 9 criteria, you get the diagnosis of ADHD, depression, bipolar disorder. Here, take this medication, go see somebody and talk about your problems, and then you're done. And I'm thinking about a new book called Get Off the Psychiatrist's Couch. Because it's really about how do you take this really whole person approach to getting truly well that lasts. And that's what I want for you. How can we help you have the best brain possible for the rest of your life. Because if you think about the low activity in your brain, and how old were you when you got scanned?
I was 26.
26.
Yeah.
And so at 26, very few 26-year-olds are thinking about what's life like when I'm 60 or when I'm 80, right? Because your brain's just finished developing, so you're really not thinking long term. Now that I'm 64, I'm really thinking about the rest of my life. And I think about my children's lives for the rest of their life and how you prevent Alzheimer's disease or how you prevent early cognitive impairment, which you clearly were going toward, is you got to work on having a healthy brain your whole life. So by doing what you're doing now, your 30s will be better. Your 40s will be better. Your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s will be better. And being forward thinking does not mean you won't be able to have any fun now. But I guess that'd be an interesting question now that you're really conscious about your brain and your lifestyle. Are you having more fun or less fun?
I'm having more fun. I'd say different fun. You mentioned at 26, not people are thinking about like getting brain healthy and all that other stuff. For me, the impetus was I wasn't healthy at all. But at 26, I think a lot of people, especially like anybody like me that came through school, it's like, how do I get that next job? Like, how do I become better at work? Like, what's holding me back? So that was really cool too. Is one of the things that was holding me back was I was getting angry at everybody I was talking to. It wasn't helping me get any promotions if you're getting grumpy, and like I could be the smartest person in the room, but if I told everybody they were stupid first, it wasn't really going to help me get my point across. You know?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to manage people if you're mad.
Exactly. So for me, it was almost like a career building thing as well because it helped me kind of put my life back on track. Also, my grandmother has dementia, so I think about that all the time. Hers is really bad. She can't remember me when I walk in the room and things along those that
That's so
nature.
sad.
It's hard, but it was great for me to identify that, like, all right, this is something that's probably going to happen to me if it happened to her, right? And if that happens, I should be conscious of it and doing what I can to prevent it. So that was kind of the impetus to doing it. Am I having fun now? I'm having different fun. So before I'd go out to concerts, I'd go out to a bar and party or like go to a happy hour with friends. I was in the entertainment and racing industry, so we'd race, and then we'd go crush beer and get drunk. That's really what you do for fun. If not, you're going to some bad restaurant eating a bunch of bad food, So yeah, I was doing pretty much everything you shouldn't do. Then I decided I wanted to get healthy, and the hardest part, I think anybody that gets sober, it's like telling your friends you're not drinking anymore, and it's almost going beyond that and saying, I'm not drinking, I'm not eating this bad food, and I'm not going to that place with these people anymore. They're like, well, what's wrong? Are you okay? Are you dying? Like, no, this is just who I am now and what I want to do. So once you figure out who those friends are that accept those, positions, they got a lot more fun. So I do a lot of intramural sports now. I do a lot of biking, like we mentioned earlier. So a couple of my coworkers here, we go cycling on the weekends together. Do cooking with a lot of my friends now, so I'm very conscious about what I'm eating. So we trade like recipes, or we'll do potlucks, things along that nature. What else am I doing for fun? Coaching. That's kind of random, and we haven't gotten there. So once I got through getting healthier, I was like, the next best thing to getting your own health is sharing with other people, right? So I was after your advisement, actually Terry's as well, that I went to Emory University and got a coaching certificate so that I can work with other people who are having similar issues as me. So that's actually, it sounds messed up, I guess, what I do for fun, but I work with other people.
Helping other people? I mean, it's the biggest joy I have when someone tells me that they're better, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's its own hit of cocaine.
Right.
Emotional cocaine, and it doesn't wear off, and it doesn't have side effects. And one of the things I learned when we did the Daniel Plan, the big project at Saddleback Church to get the world healthy through churches, is if I want to stay healthy, I have to learn it like you learned it, and then I have to give it away because it's in the act of giving that you receive. Because what you're really doing is you're creating your own support group.
Yeah.
Making it more likely you will stay on the program forever.
Oh yeah.
right?
Well,
So by giving it away and then hanging out with people who get it, right? Brain warriors, they don't do well if they don't have a community of warriors who do the same thing, who you can learn from, and so on. Now, I promised people we would actually talk about what's the difference
Okay.
between bipolar disorder and depression. And I think way too many people are diagnosed with bipolar disorder. That if they hurt their temporal lobes and they have mood instability, irritability, temper problems, and they hurt their frontal lobes from accidents or concussions, just like you had, and they have impulse control issues, they get diagnosed with bipolar disorder. They get put on lithium or Lamictal or Depakote or Trileptal or whatever. Bipolar disorder is real. And left untreated, it devastates people's lives. But these are people who literally go between two poles. So they have normal times when they're just fine. And then they'll have discrete episodes where they're down, they're sad, they're blue, they feel hopeless, helpless, worthless, guilty, suicidal. And they'll cycle out of that. And they'll either then cycle back down or they'll go up. And when they go up, their thoughts go fast, they don't need to sleep, they're terribly impulsive, hypersexual, hyper-religious, spend a lot of money they don't have, and then they'll cycle either to normal or depressed. And when I go to my board, for at least 50% of the people who come here diagnosed with bipolar disorder, they go, I don't have that. I don't have those discrete episodes. It's like, I'm sort of always irritable. I'm sort of always impulsive. I'm sort of always this way. And for those people who have bipolar disorder, omega-3 fatty acids, really helpful. Mood stabilizers like Lamictal, really helpful, or lithium. I mean, they save people's lives. But if you don't have that, the potential side effects from medicine can ruin your life. Now, depression, and it's more commonly diagnosed in women, but a lot of men have it because they don't say, I'm sad, they say, I'm mad. And it's the irritability, the negativity that just becomes pervasive. Often happens after a head trauma. Anxiety often happens after a head trauma. But the difference is people who are depressed go down and then back to normal, or they just stay down. People who have bipolar disorder go between those poles. But people who have the chronic effects of traumatic brain injury, they just sort of bounce around all the time. And the brain injury, when you get stressed, moves, job changes, ending of relationships, parents die, that stress will bring out whatever vulnerability that you might have.
Yeah, definitely. I thought, like, as I said, bipolar, that's what they thought immediately. And going back to it, probably with the intermittent explosive disorder, they saw me get angry and it was out of character, and they know that I'm normally kind of a happy person. So a lot of the people around me are like, oh, that's got to be bipolar, right? Because he's happy sometimes and really mad the other times. But I really wasn't. I mean, I guess it was easy for
Have you
them.
ever had what we think of as a manic episode that lasted weeks long, didn't need to sleep, racing thoughts, really bad decisions? I mean, I've had some women come in here and they put their family in $200,000 of debt and they have no idea how they're going to tell their husband.
Well, never that bad. Obviously, I've made a lot of poor decisions health-wise, as far as like jumping off a ski jump and things along that nature. But never like I'm gonna sell the house this week or do something like that. Never once. It was more just when I would have an emotional reaction that didn't seem to fit what the proper emotional reaction was, and that was more my issue, which is more of a depression issue and less of bipolar.
More a temporal lobe
Yep.
issue. There's a researcher, he's now at the University of Tennessee. When I learned about him, he was at Emory, Dietrich Blumer. And he actually talks about temporal lobe syndromes, that there's a whole sort of cluster of symptoms for people who've heard their temporal lobes or they have temporal lobe seizures. And I see so many people here at Amen clinics, mood instability, irritability, temper problems, sometimes weird experiences. They may hear things that aren't there, but it's not like typical psychotic voices. You're bad, do this awful thing. It's more like they hear illusions, like the sound of bees buzzing, or they think their name's being called when nobody's there, or they get the smell.
It happens to me all the time.
Of burning rubber, and there's no burning rubber.
Well, I have that one, different reasons though.
But that could be temporal lobe instability. And another potential treatment is this thing we do called neurofeedback. So we can actually see what's going on in your temporal lobe on a SPECT scan or on a quantitative EEG. And then once we see it, we can then retrain your brain to function in a healthier way and dramatically can change people's lives.
Definitely.
In a good way. All right, well, it's insane not to look at your brain, but once you do, everything in your life changes. You fall in love with your brain, and then you become a brain warrior. Stay with us. Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.